It's the Pikachu Project.
Hello and welcome to the Pikachu Project, a spoiler-filled re-ranking of all 22 Pokemon movies. We are your two expert hosts. My name is Gigi. I've seen every episode of the Pokemon anime.
And I'm Walex. I am a doctor and a big Pikachu fan.
Now, this is actually our second time recording this episode of the podcast because yesterday we realized as I was trying to save our episode and export it that I was running out of room on my laptop because of all these big audio files. So Walex said, oh, you should delete some of the raw data from the old ones. And as I was deleting the raw data from the old ones, I accidentally deleted the raw data for this episode. So we had an hour 45 episode that is just gone. So we are recording again today.
Yeah, that was an unusually honest description of what happened. I was going to say there was a really dramatic and unavoidable event.
No, it was just my bad. It was just my bad, and Walex didn't notice while I was deleting it, and it was just, we're not professionals, and we never claim to be, so
I don't know.
We're using Audacity,
Well, anyway.
And a blue snowball mic in case anyone wants to know what tech we use for this incredibly high-quality podcast. Shout out to Shelby, whose snowball mic this is, I think.
No, we bought it.
Oh, we bought this one?
Yeah, on sale.
Okay, well, shout out to Shelby, just I guess for shouting out to Shelby. So, to summarize once again,
I'm just I think that we were going to give it as a gift to her, and she's like, we don't need it or something, and then
I thought that we gave it to her and then she gave it back.
Basically, right? That's right.
Okay, I thought so.
Yeah, we did find it on sale, but we gifted it to her, right? So shout out to Shelby.
Yeah. So back in 2015, we watched all the Pokemon movies that were out at the time. We continued watching them as they came out, and we had a big ranking list with different tiers. Since it's 2020 and we have a lot of free time right now, we decided to re-rank the movies. We're watching them in rank order from bottom to top of the list. And, this is only Pikachu Project movies, so no Detective Pikachu, no special episodes, nothing like that. So let's go ahead and summarize our list so far. So we each have our own list, although they're mostly the same. Right now, we have in our very bottom tier Pokemon Ranger in the Temple of the Sea, all on its very own. One rank up from bottom to top, we have Pokemon the Movie 2000, The Power of One. Genesect.
And The Legend Awakened.
Genesect and The Legend Awakened. That's the one I can never remember the title of. Above that, we have Pokemon Heroes, Latios and Latias. Above that, we have
Hoopa and the Clash of Ages.
I also can never remember that one. Above that, we have Pokemon White, Victini, and Zekrom, or Pokemon Black, Victini, and Reshiram, which we didn't watch, but they're the same movie. We jump up one more rank. In the next rank, I have The Rise of Darkrai, and above it, Arceus and the Jewel of Life. Walex has Arceus and the Jewel of Life, and then The Rise of Darkrai above that. Both of us above those two have the Diancie movie. What's it called? Diancie and the Cocoon of Destruction.
Yeah.
And above that, we have Giratina and the Sky Warrior.
Nice.
Up in the next tier, we have
Volcanion and the Mechanical Marvel.
Yes. And that's it, right? And then we have Mewtwo Strikes Back Evolution, the 3D Mewtwo on Netflix. Yeah, above that. Although the point
currently at the
whatever,
top
it doesn't
of
matter
the
where
list.
that is on the list. It's too hard to rank. So, once again, we watched 3 movies and we'll just get into it. The first movie that we watched this time around is Pokemon the Movie. I Choose You. I'm very excited to talk about this again.
Yeah.
It's fun every time. Our plot summary was so long last time. I hope that with the opportunity to re-record this, we can get it a little shorter, but we'll see.
Yeah, the last podcast total length an hour 40, and most of it was
like an
this
hour
half.
45.
Yeah. So let's talk about the plot really briefly this time.
Okay.
So the story is a retelling of the original Pokemon anime story, but with a number of changes. So it starts off with Ash Ketchum from Pallet Town, and he is going to get his first Pokemon, but he sleeps in. And so when he gets to Professor Oak's lab, Professor Oak is like, Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle, the 3 Pokemon that most trainers usually get, are all taken by other trainers who got here on time. So you can, and he's like, and Ash says, "Is there no Pokemon for me?" And Professor Oak says, "Well, there is one." And Ash says, "This is perfect. This is clearly the best one." And he picks up Pikachu, the one Pokemon that was left, and Pikachu immediately thunder shocks him. And off they set on their Pokemon journey, but Ash is just dragging Pikachu up a hill, and he asks Pikachu, "Why are you doing this? Do you not like me?" And Pikachu says, "Pika, Pika," like shaking his head, saying, "Nope, don't like you."
But he says, we need to be friends, so he unties Pikachu. He sees a Pidgey. He tries to catch the Pidgey. Cannot catch the Pidgey because you've got to weaken a Pokemon first. Pikachu refuses to battle with the Pidgey, so Ash throws a rock at it.
But misses and hits a Spearow, and suddenly a whole flock of Spearow come, and now Ash and Pikachu are both running away from this giant flock of Spearow. There's thunder and lightning, and it starts raining, and both of them kind of collapse exhausted, but the Spearow are hot on their tail. There's no bicycle, there's no any other incidents that happen in this version. They just fall onto the ground in mud, and Ash says, "Pikachu, you've got to get into the Pokeball. It'll protect you." And Pikachu, he rolls the Pokeball towards Pikachu and stands in front in the way, and Ash Ketchum says,
"I am Ash from the... You don't know who you're messing with. I'm Ash from the town of Pallet. I'm gonna catch each and every one of you. Come at me."
And all of the Spearow attack him all at once, and right before they do, Pikachu jumps up from behind, jumps onto Ash's arm, and runs up and gives a huge thunderbolt that makes all of the Spearow kind of scatter. Or thunder shock. That makes all of the Spearow scatter out of the way. And Ash is like...
They wake up on the ground together, and Pikachu licks his face, and now they're friends.
Yeah, Ash is like, says something like, "Do you like me now?" or something. "Am I okay?" And Pikachu's like, "Pika!"
Yeah.
And then the clouds part, and they look up into the sky and see a rainbow and a huge bird flying off into the distance. And Ash says, "What's that Pokemon?" And from that bird, a feather drifts down towards...
A rainbow feather. Towards
them, and he grabs it, and it's a glowing rainbow feather. And then opening montage hits with the classic theme song of Pokemon.
Yeah. Ash catches a Caterpie. Ash journeys on, and eventually he's battling with Erica, the gym leader.
Yeah, and he defeats Erica using Pikachu, and Erica walks up and says, "Congratulations for defeating this gym challenge. You now get the Rainbow Badge." And Ash then heads off to the Pokemon Center, triumphant, and with Pikachu, when suddenly the door opens behind him. And I think he's talking to his mom at some point too, just to catch her up. Phone. Yeah, on the video phone. And then behind him, a trainer rushes into the door with a Vaporeon that's wounded and says, "My Vaporeon's hurt. Can you help me?" And Nurse Joy says, "What happened?" And he says, "I was fighting Entei." And then all of the trainers in the Pokemon Center are like, "Entei? We got to go catch Entei." And so they all rush out, including Ash and this girl in blue. And another group of people who match the profile of this wanted poster on the wall, these people in trench coats, are Team Rocket, and they rush out after them as well. And so Ash finally gets to the forest and is looking around for some time, and then sees Entei in the forest and says, "I'm going to catch you." But at the same time, the girl in blue, who is also at the Pokemon Center, says, "I'm going to catch you too." And she sends out her Piplup at the same time Ash sends out the Pikachu. And honestly, they both try their best, and neither of them are really getting in the way of each other, but both of them are failing. And Entei gets away. There's also this boy in green with a Lucario kind of in the background. And they get away, and Ash and the girl are arguing, saying, "You let it get away. No, you were in the way." And the boy in green says, "Whatever, it's gonna rain soon. You should find some shelter," mysteriously, and walks away. And Ash says, "It's a clear sky. Let's have a Pokemon battle." And so Ash and this girl, who reveals her name is Verity at some point, possibly around now, she sends out her Piplup, and Ash sends out Pikachu, and they start having a battle, and they're pretty close fought until either Piplup or Pikachu fires a stray shot into the forest and hits a boulder, which turns out to be an Onix. And the Onix lifts up and starts screaming at them. And it charges at Piplup, who's frozen stiff, and then Ash dives in the way, picks up Piplup and saves it, then hands the Piplup over to the girl, and they both start running. They're running until they get to a cliff. And
they end up flipping backwards onto the Onyx. Now they're riding the Onyx as it's rampaging.
So they're going through this ravine, riding this Onyx, and Ash is like, I've got to do something. So he leaps off of the Onyx, a moving Onyx, in front of the way, and Onyx is huge. Ash, like a truck. And Ash is now standing in the way of this rampaging Onyx, going like, stop! And Verity's like, Ash, you can't do that! And throws out Piplup, who uses a whirlpool to temporarily stun Onyx, kind of stopping it in its tracks. And Ash says, I'm so sorry, Onyx. We didn't mean to hurt you. I know you're angry and confused, but we're really trying to help here. And that Onyx calms down and goes away. And Verity says, you know, Ash, thanks for saving Piplup, and you're pretty cool. And then it starts to rain. And they say, oh, we have to go find shelter, like that boy said. And so they start heading towards shelter. It's now pouring rain and dark. And before they get to any kind of shelter, they do notice a Charmander hiding in the woods. And they both rush to the Charmander, wondering, what happened to you? Where's your trainer? When suddenly this guy starts coming through the forest, this kind of punk-looking guy with orange hair. And they're both delighted because they're like, oh...
there's its trainer.
Yeah, you must be there.
So the Charmander is running toward the trainer. The trainer kicks it away and says, I thought I told you to wait there. Basically, they learn that this trainer's name is Cross. This was his Charmander, but he abandoned it when it wasn't good enough for him because he only cares about strong Pokemon, and Charmander was too weak. And so he told it to wait there, even though he knew that it might wait there forever, with no intention of retrieving it. So Cross leaves, and he says, later, guys, with his cool Lycanroc.
And at this point, they both see that Charmander's tail flame is fading out, and they really need to get Charmander to safety, and they can't continue talking to this trainer about whether or not he should take back the Charmander.
So they grab Charmander, and they rush into this cave where the boy with the Lucario is. The boy approaches Ash and says, what have you done to this Charmander? And Verity says, no, it's okay. We're saving the Charmander. We just found him like this. They learn that this boy's name is Sorrel. He says that he's training to be a Pokemon professor, so he knows some medicine stuff. So he makes some medicine, and they feed it to Charmander. And Ash cradles Charmander in his arms as it gets better.
Yeah, and I'm a little fuzzy on this part. I think that at some point...
They start talking. Ash, they talk about where they're from, what their goals are.
Right.
Verity's a little evasive about why she's here, even though she's from the Sinnoh region.
Sorrel's,
trying to adventure and become a Pokemon
professor,
so he's trying to learn what he can. Ash says, well, I want to be a Pokemon master. And Verity says, what does that mean? Do you mean like the strongest trainer? And he's like, no, more than that. And they're like, okay. They also find out that Ash has this rainbow feather from Entei, and Sorrel tells them the story of Ho-Oh, the Pokemon that Ash saw at the beginning, and how it resurrected the 3 legendary beasts, including Entei, Raikou, and Suicune, from the burned tower to represent the thunder that struck the tower, the fire that burned the tower, and the water that put it out. And as they're talking about all of this and such, Entei actually comes in. With all of these small Pokemon following it. And it goes and sits in the corner, kind of staring at them with the small Pokemon huddled around. And Sorrel says, see, Pokemon and people are all the same when faced with weather or something like that.
Yeah, and they start to have conversations about, like, I forgot, a Pokemon leaving them or something.
Yeah.
But basically, Sorrel kind of transitions to a story where he says... Pokemon do leave us in a way sometimes. And he flashes back to when he's a child walking through a mountain, and he says, I was all alone on this mountain, but then my Luxray, who was my companion for my entire life, came and wrapped himself around me to warm me up. But when I woke up, the rescue team had arrived, but Luxray was completely like frozen.
Yeah. And he says, and it's been hard for me to get close to Pokemon since, and that's why I'm traveling around and trying to befriend Pokemon. And Ash says, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And during this time, also, you see a little Pokemon in the shadows watching Ash. Like, literally part of the shadow.
Yeah. Sometimes whispering some things to Ash as he goes to sleep.
So, they travel. The three of them start traveling around together because they decide to go with Ash to have him be the rainbow hero.
And he takes Charmander along. Ash asks Charmander, "Do you want to come with me instead?" And then Charmander wants to, and so they're traveling together. And they start. It cuts away to when they're having a battle later on. So they're kind of in front of a Pokemon Center having a battle.
And in the interim, Caterpie has evolved into Metapod, and Charmander has evolved into Charmeleon.
Yeah, right. And the Ash wins a battle. And the announcer says, "Does anybody else want to try taking on Ash?" And out of the crowd, Cross says, "I will." And so he walks up and says, "You're a bad trainer, and I'm going to beat you." And so Ash sends out Charmeleon, and Cross says, and Charmeleon's clearly surprised to see Cross. And Cross says, "Huh, you evolved. Well, weak Pokemon are still weak when they evolve. Let me show you a strong Pokemon," and sends out his Incineroar. And so they have a battle, Charmeleon and Incineroar, but Charmeleon just can't beat Incineroar, and soon the battle turns very hard against Charmeleon. He's coughing, he's not able to attack. Incineroar is using Throat Chop and preventing him from doing anything, but Ash says, "Keep fighting, Flamethrower," when Sorrel and Verity are saying, "Stop, no, you have to stop the battle, Charmeleon can't do it." Until finally Charmeleon is knocked way out of the way, and
sorely defeated.
He's sorely defeated, and they stop the battle. And Ash is crushed.
So later that day, after everyone's healed up, they're talking about it, and they say, "You know what? It's okay. Everyone loses sometimes. You just got to get stronger." But Ash is still really upset about it, and he actually says, "Pikachu would have won that battle."
And Sorrel says, "What? You don't say that. What if Charmeleon hurt you? You can't say that."
So Ash says, "You know what? I don't need you guys," and he runs off into the forest. Pikachu's following him, and he says, "Pikachu, do you think that they're right?" And Pikachu's like, "Pika, Pika." "Yes, I do." "And I'm wrong. You think that this is all my fault?" And Pikachu's like,
"Pika, Pika."
Yes. He says, "You know what? I wish my first Pokemon had been a Bulbasaur or a Squirtle."
And Pikachu's like, "Oh!" and is shocked, and Ash storms away, now out of sight of Pikachu as well.
And he turns around, and Pikachu's not following him anymore, and he says, "You know what? Whatever. I don't need you. I don't need anyone." And he sits down across a tree, and you see the rainbow wing fall out of his pocket and turn dark and dusty as he kind of falls asleep a little bit. And you see a Pokemon, the same shadow Pokemon, kind of watching him.
And when we kind of cut back, you're seeing Ash waking up in this weird sepia-tinted world.
Back in
a dreamy
his
world.
house in Pallet Town.
Yeah, and his mom is saying, "Wake up, you're late for school." And he wakes up and rushes out the door to school. His room clearly has no Pokemon or anything in it. The posters with the starters are now replaced with cars. And he rushes to school, which is now a Japanese high school. And Professor Oak is watering plants outside and says, "You're late. You're one of the 4 kids that were late today, and you're the latest one." And Ash then goes up this, or not high school, elementary school, I guess.
Yeah.
Up this regular, real-world looking elementary school. And is in class now, and Verity and Sorrel are his classmates. And now he's listening to a regular class where the teacher
is teaching about rainbows.
Yeah, he's teaching about rainbows, the science behind rainbows.
Yeah, and he forgot his homework and stuff. And then out of the corner of his eye, he sees something yellow darting around, and he looks, but there's nothing there. He's looking out the window, and he thinks he sees Ho-Oh or some flying creature, but no, it's just an airplane. So then later he's up at the top of the roof, and he's looking out across this Japanese town, and Sorrel and Verity are there, and he's like, I wonder what's out there. And Sorrel says, "Well, there's more hills and trees and ponds and lakes, and past that there's more towns, and there's more mountains, and then there's the ocean, and then past that there's pretty much more of the same." And Ash says, "But you never know until you go there." And they're like, "Man, wouldn't that be nice, to just go adventure? Wouldn't that be a cool life? But wouldn't you get lonely?" And Ash says, "I mean, I'd have my buddy with me all the time." And they're like, "Who? Your buddy?" And he's like, "Do you even have to ask? My buddy, he's always with me." And you see a flash of yellow, and all of a sudden he's kind of crying, and he can't really remember what he was talking about.
It's like, "My buddy, I can't remember." And then he looks back and sees that Sorrel and Verity have disappeared.
He's alone on this roof.
he says, "What?" And suddenly sees that yellow darting again, and he starts chasing it. He starts running, and then the school roof peels away to be a regular suburban street, and he's running along, and he says, "I remember. We used to run like this all the time, but why can't I remember you?"
And the city's falling apart, and he dives for the yellow creature, and he finally grabs him and hugs him and falls through this thing of yellow flowers. He's like, "Pikachu, it's you."
Yeah, and they fall down. They're in the sky, like falling down onto a field of yellow flowers. And just before they land, Ash wakes up in next to the tree where he was sitting. And Verity and Sorrel and Pikachu are all there. Verity says, "Do you have any idea how long it took us to find you?" And Ash says, "I'm so sorry.
I shouldn't have said those things. Like, I'm sorry." And you see the rainbow wing is rainbow again, and the Pokemon in the shadows has gone away.
Mm-hmm. So they continue on. They get into some antics where a bunch of Primeape have ambushed them in the forest, and they're all tossing them up into the air, and they can't escape because the Primeape are constantly tossing them. And Ash says, "I know," and takes out Metapod, who uses String Shot and ties all the Primeape up in a big bundle, and they all manage to get away. Meanwhile, Team Rocket stumbles onto the same group of Primeape and immediately get blasted off by the Primeape, who throw them way into the air.
Oh, I think this is actually the point at which Sorrel tells his story, because it's about Pokemon leaving you. Because Ash had the dream about Pokemon leaving him.
That's right.
And that's where he tells the story about the Luxray. But anyway, the point is, Ash says "awesome" after he tells that story.
Yeah. Good memory. Anyway,
well, yeah, I know. We have Bulbapedia pulled up, and I saw that. So
at any rate, after saving everybody from the Primeape, Metapod evolves into a Butterfree, and so they're like, "Butterfree, you're beautiful," and it's very happy. And so they continue journeying on until they run into some more trouble. A pink Butterfree is getting attacked by a Fearow, and Ash sends out his own Butterfree, who manages to fight away the Fearow. And the two Butterfrees are now kind of buddying up in a certain way, kind of like romantic, flying up in the air.
Yeah.
And Ash says, "That's so cool. They're friends."
So then later, they run into a group of Butterfree, including the pink Butterfree, who are going to go off for their spawning grounds, as Sorrel says. And Ash sends out his Butterfree, and he's like, "Whoa, this is so cool. Like, I'm so glad you're such good friends." And Verity says, "But like, Ash, if Butterfree goes with the pink Butterfree, then that's goodbye." And Ash almost looks like he's going to tell Butterfree not to leave, but he says, "Butterfree, what do you want?" And Butterfree eventually reluctantly says, "I want to go with this pink Butterfree." And so it's bye-bye Butterfree. And Butterfree flies away, and Ash is crying, and everyone's really sad to say goodbye. Pikachu's sad too.
And then suddenly Raikou shows up on a cliff just going, "Aww."
And earlier Verity had run into Suicune. She had this whole story about how her mom is a very famous long blonde-haired gym leader in the trainer in the Sinnoh region who has a Garchomp. And how she feels a lot of pressure from her. So when she was thinking about that and looking at photos of her, she saw the Suicune. So now they've encountered all of the legendary Pokemon.
So they all continue journeying now that sans Butterfree. And they get close to the mountain that they've been trying to travel towards, which is where the Rainbow Wing was directing them.
With a rainbow.
Yeah. So this was kind of earlier on. Sorrel had seen in a book that they should go to this mountain, and the Rainbow Wing was shooting rainbows literally in the direction of the mountain. And they're really close now. They can see the rainbow going right to this rock.
So they get to the mountain, and they meet this old guy named Bungie, who Sorrel recognizes from the book, who's been researching Ho-Oh his whole life, who basically tells them that this shadow that they've seen, that Ash has seen sometimes, is the shadow Pokemon Marshadow, who's meant to be a guide for the Rainbow Hero to help guide him up to put the Rainbow Wing on the pedestal and battle Ho, basically. So he guides them up the mountain, and Ash is ready to go put the Rainbow Wing on the pedestal when all of a sudden from behind the rock comes Cross and his Pokemon, and he says, "You don't deserve to be the Rainbow Hero. Let's have a battle."
Weak trainers, yeah.
Yeah.
And so Ash's Charmeleon at some point has turned into a Charizard, actually. And so he sends out Charizard, and Cross sends out Incineroar, and they're ready for their rematch. And so Incineroar and Charizard start fighting. And it's a close match, but eventually Charizard is able to very conclusively overpower Incineroar, flattening him in this giant flamethrower attack. And Cross is like very disappointed. Ash is excited. He gets Charizard. He grabs the Rainbow Wing. He's going up towards the rock, and Cross says, I saw Ho-Oh as well, but it didn't give me the Rainbow Wing. Why do you get to be the Rainbow Hero? It should be me. And before Ash can get up to the rock, Cross snatches the Rainbow Wing away. Oh, at this point, Marshadow has been observing this entire event, the battle between Incineroar and Charizard. And so Cross is climbing up the rock, and it's turning purple in his hands, basically. And the Rainbow Wing is. And eventually he plants the Rainbow Wing on the pedestal. And instead of something good happening, basically it turns to purple
that goes everywhere, and he gets blasted back. Marshadow freaks out because it's partially Marshadow's job to heal the Rainbow Wing if it gets corrupted by darkness. Marshadow goes to grab the Rainbow Wing, but the darkness takes Marshadow over too, and he starts blasting all the nearby Pokemon that have been watching, and their eyes turn like purple. Red, and basically everyone starts attacking each other.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of wild Pokemon that I've been watching as well, and all of them start attacking Ash and friends. But at the same time, Cross's Lycanroc has been turned purple-eyed as well and starts attacking Cross. But Cross reminds Lycanroc that you used to bite me like that when we first met. Yeah. And Lycanroc remembers that it's Cross's friend and becomes his ally again, and they start fighting against these purple Pokemon.
So all the Pokemon eventually have Ash and Pikachu kind of cornered at this kind of outcropping of the rock, and they're gonna attack Ash and Pikachu. So they do this big blast at Ash and Pikachu, and Ash says, "Get in the ball, Pikachu! Get in the ball!" And Pikachu says no, and he turns around and he says, "You don't know who you're dealing with. I'm Ash from the town of Pallet, and I'm gonna defeat each and every one of you. Come at me!" And they all blast him with a blast, but Pikachu runs up his shoulder again to go attack, but he grabs Pikachu and shields Pikachu from the blast, and they're both lying on the ground, really, really injured. And Ash says, "Why? What?
Why wouldn't you get into the ball, Pikachu?"
And Pikachu literally says in English, "It's because I always want to be with you." Right?
Yeah.
And so Ash forces Pikachu into the Pokeball basically to protect him, and there's one more blast from the evil purple Pokemon, and Ash kind of like dissipates into a spirit, and his hat falls on top of the Pokeball. Pikachu bursts out of the Pokeball and sees that Ash is gone, or Ash is disappearing. He tries to put the hat on Ash, but Ash is totally gone, and Pikachu is screaming out in grief. And releases
a huge thunderbolt and shocks everybody, including Marshadow and all of the wild Pokemon, and all of them snap back into their normal selves. They have their regular eyes again, including Marshadow, and Pikachu is just in grief, even though everything is kind of...
Because Ash is gone.
Yeah, because Ash is gone, though all of the fighting has now stopped. And now we cut away to Ash, who is standing in another sepia-tinted world, but this time it's the real world, but nobody can see him. He's staring at Pikachu and saying, like, "Pikachu," but Pikachu's just crying because...
Well, he can't see Pikachu either.
He can't see Pikachu either.
He's all alone on this outcropping.
Yeah.
And Pikachu can kind of hear him. They can kind of sense each other. And he starts running towards Pikachu again, right?
Yeah.
Or something.
He starts running, and then it goes into the fields, the yellow fields of flowers again.
He says, "We used to run like this all the time."
Yeah, and Pikachu starts hearing Ash and getting more excited, and then a weird rainbow portal starts opening up in the real world, and Pikachu jumps into it, and Sorrel and Verity are very shocked. They're like, "Pikachu!" And so he disappears into this portal, but appears into Ash's great flower field, and Ash like hugs Pikachu, and they're running together, and then they both emerge out of the rainbow looking portal back out into the real world, and they're both safe.
So Ash finally gets to go put the Rainbow Wing up on the rock, and Ho-Oh comes gliding through the air, and Ash and Ho-Oh commence a battle, which we don't really see. We just see the beginning of it. Later, we cut to the Pokemon Center. Ash brings in Pikachu and says, and Nurse Joy says, "Oh, who are you battling?" And he says, "Ho," and she's like, "Oh, that's nice." Wait, what?
And then they cut to it's implied that they've been journeying a long time more, and then they finally get to a crossroads, and everybody is getting ready to split up. Verity says that she's ready to return home now. She says that she should go handle business there. Sorrel says he's going to continue to look for legendary Pokemon. And Ash says that he's going to keep training to be a Pokemon master, and so they're going to split up at that point.
And then you see Bonji back on the mountain, and he's saying, "Yes, I can't wait for the next rainbow hero," because there's a rainbow or something, and it seems that Ho-Oh has chosen another rainbow hero to come up this rock and battle Ho-Oh, and he's excited to continue guiding the rainbow heroes. And then and then it's the credits, right?
Yeah, that's basically the credits. And that they roll, and you see that Sorrel has managed to find an Articuno somewhere. Cross, Lycanroc, and Incineroar are on their own journey. They're eating spicy berries, and everybody's kind of going on with their lives now. Team Rocket is in a balloon.
And you see Ash and Pikachu battling a Heracross, so they made it to the Johto region.
Yeah,
and then you also see Brock, Misty, Tracy, May, Max, Dawn, Iris, Silent, Clement, Bonnie, and Serena all each get their own kind of like frame during this very emotional song called I Choose You, and they clearly don't recognize the person they're looking at, who is implied to be Ash, except for Serena because they met when they were kids.
And that's basically it.
Yeah. So our experience watching the movie first and where it was ranked. So originally I had this movie in my second tier, kind of towards the bottom of my second tier, second from the top. I remember really, really liking the kind of abstract, weird Pokemon aren't real world scenes. I thought it was very like sappy in a way that I liked. I liked how they redid a lot of the stuff from the original anime. I thought the ending was a little confusing. I wasn't really sure what Marshadow was doing most of the time or why it was there. So I couldn't put it higher than that, but I did really enjoy a lot of it. I was also very happy to have a Ho-Oh movie finally, although it wasn't like the best Ho-Oh movie I could ask for. Do you want to add anything to that?
Well, so for me, when I first watched the movie, I had probably a pretty poor opinion of it. It's kind of at the bottom of my B tier. What I felt was that there were a few scenes that were really bold, like the scene where Ash is in a world without Pokemon, or that Pikachu says words, and a few things that I thought were kind of clever and really unique and worth seeing a movie for. But at the same time, I felt like it was a mess of a movie. It was very confusing. There were like snippets all over the place that didn't all connect together. A lot of moments felt rushed, like when Sorrel offhandedly mentions that his childhood friend died and Ash says, "That's awesome." I felt like it was a movie that, and also expecting a movie where I could see more of Ho-Oh in its own movie, I felt that was a huge disappointment. So the first time I watched the movie, I felt like this is a ridiculous movie. It's very funny in the sense that I can't believe that they made this a movie in which Pikachu talks that this is the 20th anniversary movie with these really crazy moments. But overall, I felt like it was a pretty weak movie that just kind of is just inconsistent, bites off more than it can chew in certain ways.
So rewatching this movie, I want to make one thing clear, which is that before we rewatched it, Alex was really kind of saying, "This movie is such a mess. I can't believe you ranked it so highly. Like this is ridiculous. I can't believe you like this movie." And I was fully prepared to agree with him and say, "Yeah, I do remember it being kind of a mess, and I probably am not going to enjoy it quite as much this time." And I was ready to rank it a lot lower, actually. Not ready to, but I was, if I had to, I was prepared to, and that's kind of what I was expecting, honestly. But in a crazy turn of events, the opposite kind of happened, where Alex ended up appreciating this movie more than he did before, and I felt, kind of more solid in my appreciation of this movie. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so the way I viewed this movie this time, I kind of was able to know what I was getting myself into to a certain extent. You didn't have the expectations of it being a Ho-Oh movie. And once I kind of let go of it having a plot in the same way that most movies do, or most Pokemon movies do, where you're kind of following a particular plot, and just kind of saw it for what it was, I felt like it's doing now that I'm seeing it this way, which is a series of vignettes that tell the true story of Pokemon, the story that's the core of the entire series in the anime and all of the movies, which
one
is,
might say, the alpha and omega of Pokemon.
The alpha and omega, the story of Pokemon, which is basically that a trainer and a Pokemon are best friends. They battle as a way to bond, and they go on a journey together. If you mistreat your Pokemon or only seek to win and be stronger, you're missing the entire point. Mm-hmm. And the way that the movie puts that all together by showing Ash having, set out with the certain goal, like seeing big battles on TV, wanting to be a great Pokemon trainer, but realizing that his friendship with Pikachu is so much more important than all of that. And also these moments when Ash forsakes his friendship with Charmeleon because it's weak in a way, and kind of being transported into the world where you don't have that kind of friendship and adventure. Like, you don't deserve Pokemon if you don't understand it the way that you should. And then continuing on with his bond with Butterfree, and then finally culminating in this clash with Cross, and even converting Cross and helping him to understand what it's all about, and by that being rewarded by Ho-Oh for having finally understood the alpha and omega of Pokemon. This was kind of the main story that everything was kind of culminating to. And so when you see it like that, you're less disappointed at the fact that maybe Ho-Oh didn't do so much, or that there isn't really a core conflict that you can follow throughout the entire movie, because it's not about that. It's about all of the different vignettes explaining the journey of Ash learning to become the trainer. It's almost like a Pokemon origin story in a way like that.
What it really kind of seeks out to do is first of all, it's clearly intended for someone who has nostalgia about the original Pokemon anime. Like, the beginning is almost like a shot-for-shot, like, remake of the first episode, which is, our generation's foundational myth, I think, is the first episode of Pokemon. But it really seeks to hit on all the nostalgic points. Like, they know Bye Bye Butterfree is the one where we all cried. You know what I mean? Like, so they hit on that. There's even like smaller things. Like, I think they also know that Piplup was really popular in the anime. That's why there's a Piplup in this movie. Yeah. And they know Lucario's popular. They know that people love Entei and Suicune, and like, I guess Raikou's the third one, so you have to include him. He's only there on screen for like 2 seconds. So they have those moments, which I thought the first time around and this time, I thought the scenes with Entei were very like, I don't know if powerful is the right word, but they really stuck with me, I guess.
Yeah, they're very striking.
Striking, yeah. That's the word I'm looking for.
He's very imposing. It's very surprising when.
And seeing Suicune is always beautiful and mysterious because it's unquestionably the best of the 3 legendary beasts. There's no room for discussion there. So Pokemon Crystal forever. I think it really seeks to play to that. And if you go in kind of wanting to be emotionally manipulated, you're gonna have a great time being emotionally manipulated, which is what it's trying to do.
It's very like preaching to the choir kind of movie.
Yeah.
It's like Pokemon, Pokemon and Diamond and Pearl 3212 when it's like referencing like all of the foundational myths, all of
and also the character of Cross is very reminiscent of the character Paul, which is also a very biblical name. In the Diamond and Pearl anime, who's like truly a hateable character. He's cruel to his Pokemon. He has the same story with his Chimchar that he abandons. Ash brings up and battles with Paul multiple times, loses with Chimchar, and whereas in the anime he mostly just stays being Ash and says like it's okay, buddy, like we'll do better next time, and Ash is always like pure and like full-hearted. It's kind of cool in this movie to see him lose that a little bit and kind of lose himself to that to that power hungry, winning hungriness. The other interesting thing about this is that the time he loses to Cross in the movie is apparently the first time Ash has lost a battle.
Yeah.
Which is really funny if you've seen the anime.
Yeah.
Where all he does is lose battles.
Constantly losing.
Which, maybe there's a lesson there about how that makes you a better person.
Yeah. It summarizes a lot of things that we've experienced in our foundational stories, like Pikachu choosing not to evolve into a Raichu just for power.
Although they don't really touch on that in the movie.
No, they don't touch on that, but by including a lot of different moments, they kind of touch on a lot of aspects of the anime that we've seen throughout the years. By including bits like Paul and all of these things that help us feel what the real story of Pokemon is, rather than telling a new story, which often happens in a movie with a new or specific tangential theme. This is telling the only theme that has ever been in Pokemon.
And while I think we both thought that like the Ho-Oh plot was still a little disappointing. The first time around, I remember we were really confused by Marshadow.
Yeah.
This time, not so much. I think maybe it's upon watching it a second time. Maybe we were paying more attention because we knew it would be confusing. I'm not sure. But we both kind of felt that it made a little more sense. I still think it could have made more sense. Yeah. But it did make... we did kind of understand what was going on more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also want to point out that all of the art in this movie is very, like, striking, very dramatic. Like, the colors are, like, hyper saturated in a lot of times, or very desaturated in other times.
Especially if you're looking at other Pokemon movies.
Yeah.
This movie is very cinematic. There's some like shots that look like watercolor paintings. Like it's like beautiful. Well, okay. It's like, but for a Pokemon movie, that's what I'm saying.
I'm giving her a look. I'm giving Gigi a look.
I'm sure you can hear that look through the microphone. For a Pokemon movie, it's like really beautiful, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think that a few scenes stand out more than others. I think that
of course.
What I felt before, which is that some of the battles are not that exciting per se. In terms, like, so I'm not going to say that it's the most well animated, it's the most like cleverly shot or anything. But what I will say that is a lot of the still or slower frames are very, very like lusciously colored.
Yes.
And very unique.
Yeah. So that's part of it too. It's just it's a you don't usually come away from a Pokemon movie saying like that was just beautiful to look at,
Yeah, and it's not just beautiful, but also for a purpose. It all serves to create this very impressionistic, kind of dreamlike, but overall very like I said, like almost mythological retelling of the foundational stories of our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other thing that it really seeks to emphasize is rainbows. The first time we watched it, I said there should be a drinking game for every time there's either a rainbow on screen or someone says the word rainbow.
Yeah.
Because they do that a lot.
Yeah, I want to say that one thing that this does not have is narrative tension in the traditional sense.
Yeah.
And that is something that made me feel that the movie was very messy the first time I watched it. I felt like I didn't know where this was going or how much things matters.
That's what you're expecting from a Pokemon movie is, There's no airships in this one, you know what
right.
I mean?
Yeah, so when you go into it not expecting tension, but expecting kind of like almost like a sermon, like
an abstract sermon.
Yeah, like just like a song of the Pokemon, then you don't worry so much that the beats don't necessarily stack up next to each other. So I still feel that it's a messy movie, but it's not without a reason.
Yeah. I do think it's fun at the end that apparently Ho does this all the time just for fun. Drops rainbow wings and has people come up and be the rainbow hero because Bunji's like, can't wait for the next one.
Yeah, it's truly ridiculous. I think
really silly.
The A plot is very silly. Everything from the constant saying rainbows, the legends that we're supposed to care about, to the Bunji.
I don't know. As a second gen person, we really care about the Ho and the legendary.
Sure, I mean that's fine, but like
and that part. Talk about beautifully animated. Do you remember how that was?
Oh yeah, it was kind of
when
like
he's telling the legend. It's this ink like animation, which was really amazing.
Yeah. But yeah, I still feel that the A plot is messy in this movie, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that he keeps on saying rainbow this. We're almost at the rainbow something.
It's kind of funny, but you're really there for the for the emotional moments, for for the pathos.
Yeah, for what it lacks in like story beats and like twists and turns or whatever you expect from a movie, it has emotional beats.
Yeah.
It has emotional progress.
Yeah, for sure.
It's the high art Pokemon movie that we'll talk about.
It's great seeing all of the having the emotional "I Choose You" song at the end,
Oh
seeing
my
all
goodness.
all of Ash's friends not recognizing
Right.
him.
We have to mention the incredibly sappy credits song that
Yeah.
is easily the sappiest anything that has ever
And
been
also
produced.
apparently sung by the English voice actor who does
For
Serena's
Serena.
voice, which all the shippers are just loving.
Oh yeah.
I think. But yeah. So re-ranking, I'll go ahead and say Alex too. Both put this at the very top of our list. Not yet in what we would probably have as the S tier or the A tier or whatever the top tier is. Still in the highest tier we have right now, but
It doesn't,
at the top.
It doesn't jump a tier from Volcanion and Mewtwo that we've done so far.
Yeah.
But it clearly was the best for me as well, for the reasons that I stated. It's bold, it's unusual, it says the true story of Pokemon.
Yeah. And this, I'll probably say this for the next couple batches of movies too, but this is maybe the first one that I kind of want to say, like, if you're a Pokemon fan and you haven't seen this movie, I recommend giving it a watch.
Yeah.
And go into it expecting to just be like emotionally manipulated by nostalgia and the Pokemon Company. And like, don't expect too much of a story. Just be there to be emotional. Just let yourself give in to the power of Pokemon.
Yeah, don't get hung up too much on the plot. Don't get hung up on specifics. Don't waste your suspension of disbelief on that.
Just be amazed at Ash being punished for his sin of being unhappy by being sent to the real world.
I know. The real world is the worst nightmare of Ash Ketchum, the world we live in.
But also the movie kind of tells you that even though you live in that world, you can always come back to Pokemon.
Yeah.
And buy more Pokemon products. Which we will continue to do.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, I think that's a good way to wrap that up. So I think we're doing a little better on time. A little better. It's hard to not spend a long time summarizing and talking about this movie. But luckily, this next movie will be a little easier to summarize.
Yeah.
The next movie we watched was Pokemon the Movie, Kyurem versus the Sword of Justice.
Which is a very apt description of what happens in this movie.
It is. That's why I always remember the title of this movie.
So basically, as the movie begins, you see Keldeo, who is a little Rainicorn, sorry.
You're
unicorn.
getting the word rainbow stuck in your head.
Yeah, and also Rainicorn is a term in Adventure Time.
Oh, it is?
Yeah. Anyway,
You've
Keldeo.
been exposed
I know, I've been exposed
fan.
as an Adventure Time fan. Keldeo's a little unicorn guy. He is running through the fields and he runs into Virizion, who is another green unicorn, and says, "I'm gonna."
Virizion and the other guys are not unicorns.
Oh, okay. They're just like horse guys. Runs into Virizion and says, "I want to battle you because I got to be strong to be a sword of justice." And Virizion says, "Haha, you're not ready, but let's fight." And then they fight, but Keldeo is not able to generate a sword out of its horn, which Virizion is. And she points out, "You still aren't able to generate a sword." And Keldeo says, "Well, I'll beat you with this one," which is his physical horn sticking out of his unicorn head.
But he
loses. And then we cut away to Keldeo seeing Terrakion, who is another guy, out by a waterfall, and says, "I'm going to fight you, Terrakion." And he says, "Let's do it." And they battle, but he's not able to summon a sword and is not able to use his horn that well, and so loses. And then they cut away again to him fighting Cobalion, and basically the same thing happens.
Yeah.
And at the end, he's watching the three of them, who are basically the Three Musketeers, Virizion, Terrakion, and Cobalion, all doing this Three Musketeers line, sticking their, like, they generate glowy swords out of their forehead.
Yeah.
And there's, like, putting their glowy swords together and saying their Three Musketeer line, which is like, "Greater than 1 is 2, greater than 2 is 3. By the power of our friendship, we will protect everyone."
Like
something like that. "We are the swords of justice." And Keldeo goes, "That's so cool. I want to be a sword of justice too." And so he goes forth and says, like, I think at some point he says to Cobalion, "I want to fight Kyurem." And
Cobalion says, "You're not ready. You can't fight Kyurem yet. We need to train more."
Yeah.
So it's nighttime, and in the dead of night, Keldeo wakes up and steals away to Kyurem's place where he
lair.
lives, which is like a big abandoned
mine
area
spiky
thing.
cave.
And Keldeo shows up and he says, Kyurem, I am a sword of justice, and I am here to challenge you to a battle.
And Kyurem says, sword of justice, ho ho ho, I will fight you. And he comes out and they fight, but it really is immediately not going well for Keldeo. And after he gets beat over and over and over again, Kyurem eventually breaks off Keldeo's horn. It's shattered off of his head, and now Keldeo's terrified. He knows he can't win, and he's shaking in fear.
Then
At this
the Swords
point,
of Justice have shown up at this point. And Cobalion keeps saying, we can't interfere, this is Keldeo's fight, even though he lied, and we told him not to do this. But Terrakion eventually can't stand watching it anymore, and jumps in the way to try to defend Keldeo.
says like, Kyurem, that's enough, stop it. And Kyurem won't stop the fight, and all of the Swords of Justice then rush in to try to protect Keldeo, and Kyurem freezes them all in a block of ice.
And Keldeo's so freaked out that Keldeo runs away
Yeah.
and starts falling down this mountain outside.
And then we cut away to Ash and friends, who is on a train on a mountainside. And they are excited because they're going to go to some place where they're going to sell lunchboxes shaped like Darumaka.
Yeah.
And so they go to this place and buy like 15 Darumaka lunchboxes and then get back on the train. And they're excited to get to the city. When they suddenly realize that Scraggy, one of Ash's Pokemon, did not get on the train.
Just when the train is pulling out of the station. So they run back to the outside of the train car that they're on, and they grab onto Scraggy, and just then Pikachu notices Keldeo on the roof. And they go up and they see, like, what is this Pokemon? Is it okay? Keldeo wakes up and says, no, guys, Kyurem is coming. And they're like, what? And then
Kyurem drops onto the top of the train.
The next train car starts freezing the tops of the train cars and chasing them. Luckily, they go into a tunnel, and Kyurem can't fit in the tunnel, so it has to kind of jump off the train car. And they get a little farther away from it. They're back in the train, and Keldeo's explaining to them.
Well, Keldeo's kind of hurt, so they decide that they need to get Keldeo to a Pokemon Center.
Yeah, oh, right.
So they eventually get to the city and bring Keldeo into a Pokemon Center where Nurse Joy says, oh, this is Keldeo. Keldeo usually stays in these fields with these other guys, the Swords of Justice.
These are the Swords of Justice. Let me tell you about all their personalities.
It's like, but we're being chased by Kyurem. She's like, Kyurem? Oh, Kyurem. It usually stays in a cave. This new Nurse Joy is weirdly well informed on legendary creatures living nearby.
That's her research.
I know. But Keldeo starts to recover, and basically Ash and friends are kind of clued in, and Keldeo is not sure what to do. And Ash starts asking what happened, and Keldeo explains, I was supposed to I went and fought Kyurem even though I wasn't supposed to.
And I lied to Kyurem, and I think that's why he's mad at me. Because I told him I was a Sword of Justice. And now all the Swords of Justice are frozen in an ice block, and it's all my fault. And Ash says, you know what? Then we have to go save him.
Yeah, Ash does this pep talk, says like, are you scared? And Keldeo's like, no. Are you scared?
No.
No, I'm not scared. Yeah, that's the spirit.
So they start going to try to get over to Kyurem's cave.
Yeah, they eat some Darumaka lunchboxes first, which everybody
really
enjoys
cute.
a lot. Keldeo enjoys it a lot too. And it's really cute when he eats it.
Yeah.
It's like a horse eating like a pita sandwich.
And Ash and Keldeo both eat way too fast because they're the same person.
Yeah, they're bonding.
So they start going, but all of a sudden these cryogonals show up, and they see there's ice all of a sudden appearing around them, and they realize, oh no, Kyurem's already here.
Yeah, so Kyurem appears and starts like chasing them through the city. The cryogonals are also chasing them, and Ash and friends are running to try to hide, and they run into an old subway system.
And also Iris explains that she knows about Kyurem because she's a dragon trainer, right?
Yeah.
And her dragon trainer people told her about how Kyurem is the strongest dragon Pokemon alive, and how it can transform, which it does a couple of times, into either white Kyurem or black Kyurem with its DNA splicing with Reshiram and Zekrom. And so she knows all about Kyurem, and she tells them that it's really strong, basically, is the point.
The strongest
the
Pokemon.
Strongest dragon Pokemon.
Yeah, the strongest dragon Pokemon.
So they end up in this subway area.
And they kick open a few doors, run down the subway, and then realize that the subway actually connects to this old transit museum. And so they're still getting chased, and so they need to find a way to get away. And so they see this blimp at the top of the transit museum, and Iris says, "Let's take that." And so it cuts away, and we see Iris
driving a blimp.
They opened up the roof of this building, and the blimp flew off, and she's driving this blimp through the sky. The Cryogonals are chasing them and eventually catch up to Iris when they realize, and Iris says, "It's just me in here." And so apparently Ash and the others went off in a funicular, and Iris was being a distraction in the blimp.
So over in the funicular, then all of a sudden we see Silent is being chased. He's on a train now after they've gotten up the funicular. And he's being chased by the Cryogonal and Kyurem. And they finally catch up to him, and he says, "Gotcha, it's just me." And we cut back to they decided that they were going to split up too. Silent was going to take the train to be a distraction, and Kyurem and Ash and Pikachu were going to go on and start walking.
Or Keldeo and Ash.
I'm sorry, Keldeo. They both start with K.
I know, and are of similar syllable and letter lengths.
Keldeo and Ash and Pikachu are walking towards the place, and Ash asks Keldeo about all the swords of justice, and Keldeo describes each of them to him, and he says, "Sometimes I don't understand what Cobalions." He says stuff that I don't understand, and Ash says, "I hear ya."
Yeah, but Ash says, "Those sound like great friends, and I bet they would stick with you throughout anything. It's really your friends that make you strong. Like me, I'm your friend too, Keldeo."
Yeah,
and Keldeo's like, "Wow," and just very emotional. And then they finally get to Kyurem's lair. They're standing outside of the entrance, and Ash is like, "Are you scared? Are we gonna go or what?" And Keldeo says, "I can't do it. I'm too scared." And Ash says, "That's okay. Me and Pikachu are gonna go in ourselves then, and we'll free the swords of justice. So you wait here."
He leaves Keldeo, who's standing shaking in his boots.
And Ash and Pikachu go into the lair. They see the swords of justice frozen in a block of ice. He brings out Tepig Middle Evolution, Pignite, and another Pokemon, and they start smacking at the ice to try to break them open or melt the ice.
And so is Pikachu, and Ash is also hacking at the ice.
But then Kyurem returns home and sees that they're there, and he says, "You should not be here," and is just about to attack Ash and sends a blast their direction, when suddenly it's deflected by another green blast or by something else. And it's Keldeo. Keldeo has appeared, and he says, "I'm gonna handle this. I'll face my fears."
Yeah.
And Ash says, "I knew you were gonna do this all along when I left you there."
Yeah.
And so Keldeo has now started fighting Kyurem. Iris and Silent actually appear too. They've made it
eventually show
back, and now Iris, Silent, and Ash are trying to break open the Swords of Justice, while Keldeo is continuing to fight Kyurem.
And Keldeo tells Kyurem, he says, "I lied to you." He fesses up to lying to him, and he says, "But I'm going to finish our battle."
Kyurem says, "I knew you were lying, but I was mad anyway, so I was going to fight you." And Keldeo says, "This time I'm ready, though, because I believe in the power of my friends that have helped me get this far." And suddenly Keldeo transforms, gets 3 feathers, one in each of the colors of the Swords of Justice, and it gets a new horn to replace his broken one. It's this blue, jagged horn where his old horn used to be. And now they start fighting. And Keldeo's doing a good fight, but Kyurem says, "You can't beat me with that horn, or that sword." And so Keldeo's kind of not winning quite yet, still having a lot of trouble. But the Swords of Justice are able to break out of the ice at this point with the help of Ash. And so Cobalion jumps out and says, "I was observing all of you through the ice, so I know you, Ash, and everybody, thank you for helping us. But we can't interfere at this point because this is still Keldeo's battle." And so now everybody's just watching Keldeo, who's trying his best. And at a certain point, he's going to lose. But I think
he's got his hoof stuck in ice and stuff.
Yeah. But when Terrakion's about to intervene again and say, no, we got to stop this fight, he says, "No, this fight is far from over," and at some point generates a huge glowing golden sword.
Like the ones of the Swords of Justice.
Out of where his new horn is.
Yeah.
and now is able to take the fight to Kyurem. And this fight is now going much more evenly. Kyurem might actually lose. Keldio's doing very well. But at a certain point, Kyurem throws kind of a stray shot in the direction of Ash and his friends. And Keldeo jumps in the way of that attack. And
slices it in half and gets exploded by the attack.
Yeah. And now falls to the ground and says, Kyurem, I can't do it.
You've won.
I yield. And Kyurem stomps a big hoof on Keldio's sword.
And then lets it up.
But then, takes it back.
And says, you chose to protect, rather than seek victory, you chose to protect your friends. You are truly a sword of justice. And then kind of like wobbles back into his cave.
And everybody's proud of Keldeo. Everybody's happy. The cave starts to fall apart because of the shaking of the battle. But Kyurem goes up and refreezes his cave and makes it all good again. And then we just cut away.
They're outside, and the Swords of Justice are doing their Three Musketeers slogan again, this time with Keldeo. And Ash and friends are all super proud of him. And then they continue on their journey, right? Basically.
Yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah. All right. So, originally, this movie was ranked, for me, under I Choose You, just under I Choose You, in that second tier. So, the bottom of my B or A tier, depending if you have a S tier or not. I guess my B tier. I remember ranking it highly mostly because it's very cohesive.
Yeah.
It's very rare that, I mean, if you've listened to the other episodes of this, usually we're like, well, this part didn't really make sense.
Uh-huh.
Well, I don't really know why they introduced these characters. This thing took up way too much screen time. Everything is very cut and dry in this movie. It's very straightforward, very easy for us to remember kind of the plot because it's very simple. They don't introduce a lot of extraneous characters. There's not a plot hole in sight. Yeah, that's mostly why I ranked it. That high. Although I guess it didn't excite me as the ones higher than it. But yeah.
I ranked it at the bottom of my B tier. I remember having a conversation when we first watched it where I said, it's really strong. It's sound. It has all of the features that a movie should. Yeah. It progresses in a way that makes total sense.
Yeah, it follows.
It follows. And so I remembered watching it and coming away pretty positively about it for those reasons. Mm-hmm. But not really remembering a whole lot else.
Yeah.
Also, I remember that Keldeo was like fine and not annoying. Like apparently I thought Shaman was annoying.
Yeah, more
at
annoying.
The time.
Yeah. So, re-ranking this movie, or our
current feelings,
experience watching it again. I was again impressed at how cohesive it was. Yeah. Honestly, it's very cohesive. But I do understand why I didn't really remember it very well. I think the first time around, I really valued cohesive story, interesting premise, kind of more, quote, objective things like that, rather than the subjective experience of like, am I excited during this movie? Because as much as it's a very cohesive story, there aren't too many moments of like true excitement or intrigue during it. Yeah, not that it's bad, but because it's a good movie, but it doesn't have that oomph, It doesn't have that je ne sais quoi that some of the other ones do.
It's not a very oomphy movie. Well, I do feel like there is some oomph because, like, I do think that the cohesiveness, it's very cohesive. Like, It actually has a lot of clever touches. It's getting into the department where they're just doing things well. The Darumaka lunchboxes are very cute.
They're very cute. I really want one.
Subtle introduction of Team Rocket throughout the movie where Team Rocket is kind of in trench coats spying in like the corners of different shots.
Yeah, in the beginning of the movie in like certain frames, and then they're in the credits, but like they don't actually really do anything.
Yeah, and I think that Kyurem's character is interesting and fun, and Keldeo's character is also charming enough. Mm-hmm. Everything is really...
Swords of Justice all have pretty distinct personalities, partially because it's maybe playing on our knowledge of the Three Musketeers.
Yeah, so you can't really fault this movie for much of anything. Its pacing is good. The tension is there. It always manages to give you a little surprise. But like I mentioned a while back about maybe the Shaman movie, you're not going to go to bed thinking about Keldeo. Yeah. There's not a strong emotional core that like gets you through it other than his strong desire to be a sword of justice, which is entertaining enough, but it doesn't really, hit you in a very strong, relatable kind of place. And so, again, I really don't want to downplay how objectively sound this movie is.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to...
It's very sound.
I don't want to quite damn it with faint praise because it's not even bad enough for that. It's quite
and there are some moments that I really enjoy. I think my favorite is Iris just deciding to steal a blimp, which they do return in the credits. You see them return. They have returned the blimp.
Yeah.
But like, I just like the idea that Iris is like, let's just take that blimp. Also, I know how to drive a blimp.
Yeah, she's probably been dying to do this as a dragon lover.
That's what it seems like.
Yeah.
So I enjoy that a lot too.
Yeah. So
there's some moments that are pretty fun. Ash and Keldeo are very similar, which is always fun.
Yeah. You can't quite say that this movie isn't inventive or good, but it just doesn't... It isn't anything to write home about, I guess.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
So, in terms of re-ranking it, I ended up putting it in a tier lower than I Choose You this time, since that's what it was next to last time. Under the enjoyable enough tier, kind of in the middle, actually very much in the middle of that tier, underneath Diancie and above the Arceus and Darkrai movies.
I ranked it in the exact same place, just under the Diancie movie. It basically
agreed on this one.
It basically ends up almost in the dead center of our list,
which I think feels right.
Yeah, I think feels right. It's actually a little bit higher than the center of the list because the bottom's filled with a lot of like oof kind of movies.
Well, and definitely right now it's higher than because we haven't reached the S tier movies yet.
Yeah. But my kind of reasoning was basically that sure, it's way more structurally sound than the Diancie or the Shaman movies. It has less wasted screen time, but I will remember Diancie and the little Carbink and Shaman and the kind of, charming relationship that they had more than Keldeo and Kyurem. And that's saying something considering I use Shaman as my example of something I'm not going to think about when I go to bed. So
I think I pretty much agree. It is we were talking about how it is nice to have a Gen 5 movie much higher up the list than the other two. That's always nice that they weren't all they weren't all bad.
And it's certainly not like worse than the Darkrai or Arceus movie because those movies start to have like serious like kind of like scattered bits and like weird choices and weaknesses across the board. Yeah. So strong center.
Very strong center. I think that's a good place for it to end up. All right. Our very last movie we have is the 8th Pokemon movie, Lucario and the Mystery of Mew.
So Lucario and the Mystery of Mew.
It came out on your birthday.
Oh yeah, in
that year,
Japan,
in 2005.
July 16th on my birthday.
Fun fact.
And this movie is special because it's the swan song of the original voice actors the Swanna song of the original voice actors for Pokemon. Right after this movie is Pokemon Ranger. Which was a rough start for Sarah Natacheni and folks. So this is in some ways.
Sorry, that was my computer. This is funny because I think that happened when we were it happened twice. That happened during our recording that got deleted also. So I got some bleeps and I said, that's my computer. So I guess it's pretty much the same as the first recording.
You're actually getting a very similar experience.
All right. So let's get into the summary of Lucario and the Mystery of Mew.
So Lucario and the Mystery of Mew is the third movie in the Hoenn region. And it starts off with the ancient past. There's a queen with long blonde hair and she's looking over a kingdom which seems to be at war, and she's with her knight Sir Aaron, who is
kind of edgy looking. Yeah,
got a pointy hat and is really blue.
And, like dark blue.
And she says to him, "This kingdom will not survive the coming battle." And Sir Aaron says, "You have to run from the kingdom." And she says, "I'm going down with the kingdom, whatever happens."
And on the ground is a Lucario who's communicating with Sir Aaron the knight through these crystals that are coming out of the ground, through aura, basically. Lucario is kind of battling the Pokemon a little bit and just trying to get a scene of the ground. And he's basically saying, it's really bad down here.
Yeah. And Sir Aaron thinks, and he doesn't want to abandon her, and everything's going down. And he, with resolution, jumps on his Pidgeot and goes off towards the battlefield. And so as he's climbing up, we cut away to him climbing up some rocks, and the Lucario jumps down behind him, and Lucario's eyes are hurt at this point for some reason.
Yeah.
And
but he's
Sir
sensing
Aaron,
everything with aura still.
Yeah, Sir Aaron says, Lucario, what happened to your eyes? And he's like, don't worry about me. What are you doing? And Sir Aaron says, I'm abandoning the kingdom and I'm abandoning the queen.
And he sucks Lucario into his staff.
Yeah, he throws
with aura powers.
Yeah, he throws his staff at Lucario.
And Lucario says, "No, how could you, master?" And he flies away on his Pidgeot.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see the two armies of Pokemon and people clash, the green army and the red army, and they're all fighting with each other. And then all of a sudden, we see this green color glow across the landscape. And all the Pokemon stop fighting and everyone's looking around. And we cut away to a storybook that a mom is reading to her daughter. There's this mom and daughter that's in every single Pokemon movie as a little cameo, and they're reading this story, which is very exciting. She's reading the story to her daughter, and she says, and then Sir Aaron found a way to save the kingdom from this horrible battle, and hatred was replaced by love and understanding, basically, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now we cut away to Ash and friends who are traveling. This is Ash, Max, May, and Brock are traveling to this big Pokemon competition. They're so excited. But apparently you have to, in this city for this competition, dress up. And
this is that same castle, that same city that was 1,000 years in the past.
Yeah. Ash dresses up exactly like Sir Aaron was.
Yeah, in this costume that looks a lot like Sir Aaron's costume.
Yeah, and everybody else dresses up. Pikachu is a little jester. It's adorable. Yeah. And they all get ready for the battle. And so as they're on the arena, the person who is kind of like the queen, but probably
looks exactly like her.
Yeah, probably ceremonial in this modern age, comes out and says, this tournament is to celebrate the sacrifice or the efforts of Sir Aaron, our hero, of ancient times, and so we have this tournament in his honor. And so the opening montage plays. It's one of the best songs. It's the unbeatable song from 3rd Gen.
And we see a lot of battles. Ash is rising up the ranks in this competition. We also see during this time a Mew flying around and changing into different Pokemon. He's a Pidgey, he's a Pichu, he's a Mime Jr.
So he's like playing pranks on everybody throughout this battle. And at the end, we see a face-off between Ash and Pikachu at the finals against a mysterious knight with a Weavile.
Yeah.
And they start battling, but then Pikachu is able to defeat the Weavile. And the knight comes over and takes off her helmet, and it's a girl, and everybody's surprised.
It's the end of Metroid.
Yeah, it's the end of Metroid. And she says, "Good job, Ash. Congratulations." And they announce Ash the victor, and they cut away to a ball where Ash is being seated as the victor of the tournament, which makes him this year's Aura Guardian.
Yeah. And they give him the staff that Sir Aaron had Lucario in at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah,
Ash and he says, "Here's the ceremonial staff." And Ash hears a voice from this staff that says, "Why, Master? Why did you betray me?" And Ash looks around. No one else seems to have heard it. They commence with the ball. Everyone's dancing, having fun. The Pokemon are eating food.
They actually, a few of the Pokemon peel off to the attic, and they're having their own little kids party up there. They're jumping on seesaws, and it's adorable.
Yeah. And Mew joins them too.
Yeah.
Mew turns into a Pikachu and is dancing with Pikachu, and they're having a great time. Meanwhile,
down at the ball, Brock was dancing with the girl who won the tournament with the Weavile, but then she says, "I have to go," and peels off, goes off to the balcony, and then she puts on her communicator and it's talking through a satellite to somebody named Banks over in a building far away. And so she's actually here for Mew. She says, "There's a Mew here, and I'm going to find it."
And of course, Team Rocket's hero Meowth is in that room and overhears and says, "Maybe we ain't the only bad guys in this joint."
Yeah, and so she peels off. She looks like a spy, and then shortly changes into this crazy super spy in the early 2000s outfit with like leather and like gadgets and a visor, and grapple hooks onto the roof and starts heading towards where Mew is, and Meowth is following behind. And eventually finds Mew and sends out her 2 Weavile and says, "Go, tag Mew." And the Weaviles jump into the window where the Pokemon are playing in the attic.
Meowth is in there too, actually.
Yeah, Meowth finds his way up there as well.
Yeah.
And they both find Mew and aggressively start trying to tag it. They
push him up against a wall
and gonna slam the tag onto Mew, but Mew gets away and is hiding, disguising himself as other Pokemon, disguising himself as a Pikachu and then a Meowth.
Yeah.
And the Weavile are trying their best to capture the Mew, and just before they do, Mew teleports away with Meowth and Pikachu. And the Weavile are disappointed. The super spy is like, why did you do that? I told you just to tag it, not attack it.
Yeah. And meanwhile, Max has followed, he's noticed the Pokemon are all gone. He follows Munchlax up, and he sees through the door the
Mew just before it teleports.
Just before it teleports away. Max forces the door open. It's been like jammed with some ice from the Weavile. And all the Pokemon there are trying to explain what's going on. Meanwhile, Ash is meant to commence something else at the ball, right?
Yeah, so he's sitting and observing the ball, but then she says, now it's time to do the pose and have the fireworks
commence. To start the fireworks. So he does this crazy pose, and Lucario bursts out from the staff, and his eyes are still kind of hurt, and he looks around and he runs up to Ash and says, Master, why did you abandon me? Why did you betray me? And Ash is like, huh? And Lucario slowly opens its eyes. It sees that this is not Sir Aaron, and it looks around completely confused. And it runs away and runs down to the grounds of the castle.
And then I think the queen person says, that was Lucario. We should go find it. But I think before they do, Max bursts back.
No. Lucario is running around the castle grounds, remembering what it looked like 1,000 years ago, which to him was just a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
And everything looks different. He's in this room that used to be Sir Aaron's house, I guess, or a room. And then the Queen and Ash and May and Brock are down there too. And the Queen, who looks exactly like the Queen in the past, says, I know I look like her or whatever,
yeah.
But I'm not who you think I am. You've been in this staff for a very long time. We're not really sure what happened. Can you explain it to us? So they're back up it seems like the ball has been canceled or has ended.
Yeah.
And Lucario explains to them that Sir Aaron betrayed the kingdom and trapped him in that staff, and that's why he was in there. And she says, but what? Sir Aaron is our hero. There's a big poster of him on the wall. The legend, yeah, big painting of him on the wall. And the legend says that, he saved the kingdom from this war. And she's like, we'll have to investigate this and find out what's the truth. Yeah. Then Max bursts in and says, I saw Mew.
Yeah, and everybody doesn't believe Max.
Everyone's like, what?
But then behind Max, the super spy pops back in and says, no, Mew was here. I saw Mew as well.
So they've figured out that Mew has teleported away Meowth and Pikachu. And the Queen says, you'll have to go over to this rock formation that looks like a tree. It's called the Tree of Beginning. And that's where Mew lives. So you'll find them there, basically. And she says, Lucario, you go with them so that you can sense the way with your aura powers. And Lucario says, I live to serve, basically.
And Ash is going to go too because he needs to get Pikachu back.
Yeah, they're all going, basically.
And they're all going. And Kid, or the super spy, says, I want to come too because I want to figure all this out. And then Brock actually recognizes her at this point because she kind of took off some of her disguises. And he's like, oh, you're Kid Summers, the super extreme person.
Yeah,
she sets records.
All of these world records.
She's been to space. She dives into the deepest oceans. Yeah. You're an adventurer. That's awesome.
And she's here to research Mew and break a record of some kind.
Yeah, basically. And so
she has a Jeep, so.
Yes, she has the car. So they all decide to set forth. But before they do, during the night, Lucario goes up into the castle and Ash says, hey, and then Lucario kind of almost bowls him over by dodging out of the way. And Ash says, it's really great that you're coming along. And Lucario basically says, I'm coming along for the Queen. I have no friends and you are not my friend. And then they all set forth.
According to Bulbapedia, it's a Humvee.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, it's
Very
more like
important point.
it's more like a Humvee than a Jeep, I guess. Anyway, so they take off in this yellow Humvee. Team Rocket manages to cram themselves into the trunk because they got to rescue Meowth.
Yeah.
And they're traveling on this Humvee, and then they get stopped by all these geysers, which are coming out of the ground.
Lucario's Naruto running in front of them the whole time.
Yeah, to sense the way because he can detect Mew's aura or something. And then they get stopped by these geysers, and they say, well, I guess we have to wait for these geysers to stop before we can
Here's a hot spring over here. Let's go
through.
chill in the hot spring.
Yeah. So they all go bathe in this hot spring
Except
for a little
Lucario.
while, except for Lucario. But he flashes back to when he was at a hot spring with Sir Aaron.
Yeah.
He's like, I miss Sir Aaron, basically.
Yeah.
Emotional. Yeah. And Ash and May notice that there's a flower up on a cliff somewhere that looks super
flower.
weird. And they go up, and Ash actually sort of grabs it and picks it.
But falls down.
And falls down into the water. And then they start seeing a vision of Ash back up there and falling back down into the water. And somebody explains to them, this, I think, kid, this is a time flower. It can show you past events if you have the aura. Mm-hmm. And they're like, whoa, that's so weird.
And Lucario has been saying that he mistook Ash for Sir Aaron, not because he was wearing a costume that made him exactly look like Sir Aaron, but because he has a similar aura to Sir Aaron. So they think maybe Ash can use aura powers too.
Yeah. And so later that night, they are in a campfire, and Ash is explaining to everybody the story of how he met Pikachu. We never used to be friends. In fact, he really didn't like me at all, but it was a bunch of Spearow, and then we became friends. And then Lucario, like, grumbles something, like, kind of rude.
Walks away in disgust.
Yeah. And he says... Ash gets kind of like upset at the way that Lucario is responding and says, maybe you're lying. Maybe you were the one who betrayed the kingdom and not
I bet you
Sir
betrayed
Aaron.
Sir Aaron.
Yeah.
Lucario says, you know what? I bet Pikachu ran away from you.
Yeah, and then they just start fighting, and they're really...
Physically fighting.
Yeah, rolling down the hill into the hot springs and really angry at each other. And later on, they split up again. Ash is very grumbly at Lucario, and Lucario is standing next to a tree. And Max comes and gives him some chocolate and says, I
here's
hope
chocolate.
you're okay. Yeah, here's chocolate. Lucario likes the chocolate. Anyway, so the next morning...
Oh, and they also at some point befriend a Bonsley.
Oh, yeah. There's a Bonsley
who's going to
there.
eat their food.
Yeah. So they continue in the Humvee towards this kind of rocky valley, and Lucario stops his Naruto run there and says, this is where Sir Aaron traps me in the staff. And conveniently, there's a flower right there.
Yeah.
And when the time flower is activated, everybody sees a vision of these two armies, and then exactly what happened at the start of the movie plays out again, where Sir Aaron traps Lucario in the staff. But of course, the time flower cuts away just before
the green glow comes and saves everyone.
And as the vision vanishes, Ash is standing there behind it in tears, going like, Lucario, I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. I should have known.
Yeah.
And at this point, Regirock explodes out of the ground and starts attacking them. And Lucario says, quick, we got to get into this
that means that we're close.
Cave.
It's a warning.
Yeah, Regirock is sending out a warning. We should be close. And so they travel through this cave.
So I also want to say during this time, during their traveling there, we've also seen some scenes of Mew playing with Pikachu and Meowth. Meowth's kind of napping, hanging out. Pikachu keeps saying, Pika, like basically, I want to go home to Ash. Meowth's like, you want to go be with your toy friend? Is that what you're saying? I love imitating Meowth.
Yeah,
And Mew keeps trying to entertain them with more and more toys. They end up being in this weird vein thing in the tree where these bubbles are bringing them up higher into the tree. Yeah.
And then they kind of like burst out and realize, oh, wow, we're really far away from the castle and everything.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Ash and friends managed to get to the base of that very tree and emerge out of the cave to see a beautiful, like, grassy cave with rivers and waterfalls, and ancient Pokemon are flying around having fun. And Kid says, no person has ever been here before. Nobody has ever disturbed this place.
Yeah.
We're the first.
Ancient Pokemon.
Yeah.
And she releases these little robots that are meant to go basically get some more research.
Yeah.
And we see the little robots flying around. We see one of them fly into this kind of tunnel area, and attach onto this crystal something thing. But then we see this red glob come up and swallow it up, and it disappears.
So all of the folks are running up the tree now, and then they get attacked by Registeel on the way up. And then later on, they're getting attacked by Regice now. And so they're being chased by all of these Regis, and then...
It's actually pronounced Regice.
Regice.
Just kidding.
Regice. So they're getting chased by all of them as they're going up the tree. And they're getting close. I think they hear Pikachu up above. And they get to this crossing. Lucario's like fighting the Regis back. I'm just laughing just because Reggie Fils-Aimé. Anyway, the former president of Nintendo. So the Regis are chasing the Ash and friends. And then they get to a bridge, a rock bridge, and Lucario blasts the bridge behind them so that the Regis can't follow.
Reggie Fils-Aimé, my coworker's cat Reggie.
So the Regis cannot. 3 people named Reggie cannot follow Ash and friends anymore. And they think that they're safe, and Team Rocket actually has been following them fairly closely as well. But then suddenly these orange gloms come and swallow up Jesse, and then swallow up James, who releases his Chimecho and Cacnea, "Save yourselves!" As he gets swallowed up. And now Ash and friends are worried, and before they can figure out what's going on, the Regis have managed to catch up with them across the broken bridge, and they send them running as well. So Ash and friends are continuing up the tree, but they're realizing that they're both close, and it's really dangerous now. Kid talks to Banks, who's in across the world, looking at the data, and he says the tree is coming alive, and it's becoming very I guess
basically
how to describe it.
He's saying that it's an immune reaction.
Yeah, there's an immune reaction that's coming after you guys.
Yeah, only the humans, not the Pokemon, are seen as kind of like viruses.
Yeah, I think it starts to glom Lucario and then like stops when it realizes it's a Pokemon at some point.
Yeah.
Now Ash and Lucario are about to get close to where Pikachu is and says, "You guys have to get out of here. It's getting too dangerous. You guys split off and try to head for the outside. I will continue up to find Pikachu." And Lucario says, "I will come too." And Ash says, "Why?" And Lucario says, "Because you would do the same thing in my place." And they're friends now. They understand each other after these experiences. And they're going up to save Pikachu. All of the others split off and try to escape. They get close to Pikachu, but unfortunately they cut away to Kid, Max, May, and Brock. And they actually are getting trapped by these orange gloms. And May, Max, and Brock all get glommed up by these orange blobs.
And they release their Pokemon. Their Pokemon watch on as they get glommed up.
And they're crying. The Pokemon are crying. And these gloms sometimes look like ancient Pokemon, like Kabutops or Cradily. Yeah. And so Kid manages to escape and runs off by herself. Now Ash and Lucario see across this giant ravine on the other side of this ice bridge. Pikachu is there, and Pikachu's like, "Pika!" and so excited. And Ash is like, "Pikachu!" and he's so excited. He jumps out onto these ice bridges that are very leaping precarious.
From them with some crazy parkour.
Yeah, while these winds are blustering and blowing him possibly down to the depths below. He's jumping across because he wants to be reunited with Pikachu. Pikachu starts running down, and they manage to
catch each other in the air. And they start falling, and then Kid Summers swings out of nowhere and rescues them, and they're all safe back in there. And I think she probably tells them, "Hey, your friends were swallowed up." Yeah,
your friends didn't quite make it. He doesn't react too strongly, which I thought was odd.
Yeah.
And they're starting to try to escape, but then they also get cornered by a bunch of orange gloms, and both Ash and Kid get glommed up. Kid says, "I guess this is the end of the line. Bye, Weaviles."
Kid gets glommed up. And Ash gets glommed up. He sends out his Pokemon and he says, "Bye, Pikachu. Take care of them. I'll miss you. I love you."
Yeah. And Pikachu's devastated, is really sad, and starts crying. And at that moment, Mew floats in and sees all of these Pokemon crying, including Pikachu, and is not clear what's going on.
Mew clearly sees that these people are upset and will not play with him. So
And
he touches a crystal, and this green glow spreads out along the tree and heals the tree, and and everyone floats back up from the ground, and they're back alive.
And all of the orange glows have vanished from the crystals, and everything seems better until the orange glow seems to flash back. And then they notice that Mew is dizzy and feverish.
Yeah.
And they're like, what's going on?
And Kid figures out that the tree and Mew have a symbiotic relationship. And Mew's used too much of its energy, so now Mew's feeling sick. If Mew's feeling sick, the tree is feeling sick. And the crystals start decaying and falling apart. And they realize that in order to heal Mew, they need to heal the tree too.
So they rush towards the center of the tree and find the heart of the tree, which is this huge blue crystal. And they find at the center of the crystal is actually encased Sir Aaron.
Not at the center of the crystal.
It's like it's like kind of like frozen, suspended
it's like
inside the crystal.
It's like nearby. It's a different crystal.
Oh,
He's
okay.
not in
Different
the heart.
Crystal. Yeah, okay, not in the heart. Different crystal. And Lucario's like, "Oh my gosh, it's Sir Aaron!" And then conveniently at that moment, there's a time flower right there, which replays Sir Aaron's last moments, where he actually goes into the crystal and says to Mew, "I need you to save this kingdom and heal the land." And Sir Aaron uses his aura powers
to share with Mew.
Shares it with Mew.
To power up the tree of beginning.
Which then creates the glow that saves everybody. But in doing so, he exhausts all of his energy, and he's starting to get jolted by this electricity and collapses by the crystal, and is saying, "Lucario, I'm sorry. I didn't, get to explain why, but if,
I lied to you because I knew that if I told you what my plan was, then you would come with me, and I didn't want you to suffer the same fate that I am. I hope that someday you wake up in a more peaceful future. I wonder what that will be like." And Lucario's watching with an amazed Lucario face.
Tears streaming down his
face, and he says, "I'm sorry, forgive me." And Sir Aaron says, "You're my friend. I wish that you had understood that you were my friend. You're not my servant or anything."
Servant, yeah.
And Lucario is very emotional.
Yeah. And then they realize they need to power up Mew again with aura in order to save the crystal and save Mew. And so Lucario starts doing it, but there's not enough energy in his aura to power up Mew. And so Ash at that point says, "You know what you guys told me, that I had similar aura to Sir Aaron? I think I know what I need to do." And he grabs Sir Aaron's gloves, which are actually still there, and he uses them and points them at Mew, powering up an aura bubble. And now they're both together powering up an aura, and Pikachu is going Pika Pika, because everybody knows that, Ash, if you power up the aura, then you'll be suspended just like Sir Aaron. And he says, "I know, I have to do this." And then they're both powering up a giant aura bubble that seems like it's enough. And just at the last moment, Lucario pushes Ash out of the way and says, "I'm going to take it from here. You guys, stay safe and, get out of here," basically. And they all witness the sacrifice of Lucario, who manages to make the aura large enough. And
Mew heals the tree.
Yeah, heals the tree.
And Lucario sits down next to where Sir Aaron was. And they say, "Lucario, are you going to be okay?" And Lucario's like, I'm going to be with Sir Aaron, and that's all I really want.
And he, I guess, kind of gets suspended.
Yeah.
So Ash runs back out and reunites with everybody else who has been who have also been deglommed.
Yeah.
And they all ask, "Hey, Ash, everything seems okay now, but where's Lucario?" And he says, he went off to see a friend.
He had to go be with a friend.
Yeah.
He had to go see a friend.
Yeah.
And he says, "But Lucario's aura is with me."
And then it abruptly cuts to credits. And in the credits...
and also at some point, Meowth reunited with Team Rocket.
Yeah.
Importantly.
Yeah. And in the credits, you see everybody splitting up, and you see Sir Aaron and Lucario. Sir Aaron's eating a chocolate bar in like this gray world, implying that they're together again. And that's kind of the end of the movie.
Yeah.
So what did we think?
Initially,
what
the
did you
first
think?
time we watched this movie, I had this ranked one tier down from I Choose You and the Kyurem movie, Unicorn Sword movie, underneath the Diancie movie. I don't remember too much about watching this movie the first time around, honestly. I remember enjoying it. I remember thinking Lucario had a compelling story. I remember really enjoying everyone dressing up in a costume, and that's basically all I remember.
Yeah. I ranked it quite highly. It was just under some of my highest ranked movies. It was like 6th place in the list overall, which is, considering it's like a list of 20-ish something, it's pretty high praise. But I actually didn't remember anything when we were starting to watch the movie either. All I remembered was that Ash and Lucario supposedly have a great relationship that was well built out. And I remembered that the costumes were really adorable at the start of the movie.
Yeah, so rewatching the movie again, it's, again, a very solid movie. It's pretty straightforward, very easy to follow. Nothing seems too out of place. There's a lot of cute Pokemon moments at the beginning with all the Pokemon playing together. I really like how Mew is characterized the same way Mew is always characterized, which is, I don't really care about anyone. I just want to play. As long as I can play, I'm happy. If something gets in the way of me being able to play with other Pokemon, I am unhappy and will fix something. I think Lucario's story was great. Lucario's it was an interesting kind of premise to have the story really be the emotional journey of Lucario reaching narrative catharsis, basically, in the very classical sense, including the death part. And I really enjoyed Lucario's surprise Lucario face that we got to see a lot of times.
A lot of times. Oh.
It's also always fun to see Ash act kind of immature, physically attacking Lucario and saying, I bet you lied to us, and saying all this stuff. I think that's a side of Ash we don't see as much in the later movies. Being very childish. So.
Yeah, I think that I want to make clear. When you watch this movie, you can see immediately that it is of a higher caliber than a lot of other movies. The art is very lovingly drawn in that kind of like old, like hand-drawn style. And the moments are well directed. I think when we were talking about the scene with the Pokemon in the attic and the Mew, there's so much going on and it all makes sense. It's very well directed, and all of the movie doesn't miss a beat throughout the whole thing. And the Pokemon being cute and all playing together, that's all very, very well done, all well directed. And the relationship with Ash and Lucario really is very strong. It's very human. It's the Ash, again, being kind of bratty is very realistic take for a 10-year-old child that like the movies are not always inclined to do. So we were both very impressed. I think Gigi was saying throughout the movie, she was like, this is keeps going back and forth from being at the very top of my list to like kind of like,
well,
around the top.
I had trouble ranking it at the end, but we'll talk about that.
But throughout the entire movie, I guess what I said at the end when we stopped watching it is that it's got chops. It's got a lot of like ease. It does things that other movies wish they could do in this list.
I think what you said was other movies try to do things and this movie just does them.
It does it effortlessly. It's like, of course this will be funny, of course this will be cute. Other movie, it's got jokes too. It's got a lot of humor throughout the entire movie.
I really love there's a moment when at the beginning of the movie when Mew is trying to disguise itself as Meowth. So it becomes a Meowth and then spins Meowth around and around and around.
So that it's like shuffling them.
And goes Meowth. And then Meowth says, "You got a plan, buddy?" And the two Weavile look at each other and they're like, obviously that one is Mew. It's really funny.
Yeah, exactly. It's got a lot of humor like that throughout the entire movie. That's not accidental. That's not intentional. That's not like us being like, we're a Pokemon fan, so we're like laughing at this ironically or something. Yeah. It's got like the talent to make a lot of great moments effortless. And so that's a really strong strength that I couldn't really remember about this movie when we watched it the first time. So anything else you want to add about your experience watching the movie now?
Not particularly. I mean, I think it doesn't have any like big grand like morals to tell you or anything, but like I think the story instead is about the relationships between certain characters, which I think they do in a really compelling way. In this movie. Yeah,
I think, this kind of servant situation that he has with Sir Aaron, but Sir Aaron clearly feels like that Lucario is his best friend. Yeah. And how Ash helps Lucario see that in their equal partnership together throughout the movie, and also in Ash's relationship with Pikachu. And so it doesn't have the kind of moral of the story kind of a thing, but it's a great character portrait of Lucario and gets a lot of themes across. It's very emotional. Like I will say that I was very touched at Lucario's tears streaming down his face.
Seeing Lucario totally lose it at the end.
Yeah, regretting that he sees the vision of Sir Aaron right next to him, but he'll never be able to explain how sorry he is. It's very excellently done in a way that other Pokemon movies dream that they could do.
Yeah. Kid Summers looks like she's from Totally Spies, a show that I never watched, but I know the aesthetic of enough to know that she looks exactly like she's from Totally Spies.
Yeah, and they're clever in making us think that she's a bad person at the start, both by having a dark type Pokemon.
The only thing I know from Totally Spies is that video of them using the mirrors to redirect the lasers, and it creates a. I'll show it to you later. It's ridiculous. It's really funny.
Yeah. But Kid Summers is great, interesting.
It's also nice not having like a classic like villain in the movie, you know.
Yeah, I think that's another thing I forgot to mention was
the villain is Mew.
Yeah. Well, it's not, right? Like, so the first time. But I'm like. The first time I watched this movie, I was more confused about it because I felt like, oh, is Kid the villain? Is Mew the villain? What's the conflict here? And at the end of this movie, you realize that there wasn't really a conflict that needed to be resolved. There wasn't like a great moral wrong that needed to be righted, except for the misunderstanding of Lucario.
Yeah.
And that's kind of tangential to the main antagonists, who are basically an immune response. And the funny thing about this movie is that it allows me to explain a little bit in some doctor speech that is why I'm on this podcast. My expertise on this podcast.
Yeah.
Basically, the whole moral of the story is like, Mew, like, don't, social distance. Like, don't, like, take in foreign humans. Because none of the conflicts that happen in the back half of the movie happen for a reason other than
the tree's immune response.
Yeah, the immune response reacts overly strongly, like an allergic reaction, or more like kind of a septic reaction.
And I think Banks even says like the immune response was too strong at one point.
Yeah, he describes
and that's why it's like kind of the tree is dying again.
Yeah, he described it as shock, which is not entirely accurate unless he was in septic shock. He was kind of like septic with an infection causing, a high fever, like, vasodilation, all that stuff that can cause body to destabilize quickly because of this infectious agent, the humans. So maybe Ash is the real villain after all.
So maybe humans are the real coronavirus.
Yeah, humans are the real coronavirus. Really, this is not unlike the, I guess they say cytokine storm or whatever that happens with the coronavirus.
Saying all these words I don't know well.
Yeah, but basically it is an exaggerated immune response that responds to an infectious disease. Yeah. So weird for that to be the villain. And confused me before in a way that I realize now doesn't matter. Is maybe again like a common running theme with this rewatching is like seeing the movie for what it's trying to do.
Is
trying to tell the journey of Lucario, not telling the journey of Ash trying to retrieve Pikachu from this tree.
It's incidental.
Yeah, incidental.
Also, Pikachu's not kidnapped. Mew just wants to play with Pikachu.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so re-ranking this movie, I ended up ranking this movie below I Choose You, but above the Volcanion movie and the 3D Mewtwo movie, which is still a bane of our existence.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a solid movie, but I think we kind of talked about this back and forth, and I'll go ahead and say that you ranked it in the same place. I think the thing that kind of made me feel confident about this is that this is a really solid movie all around, and it's got a lot of love in it. It's got a lot of compelling things about it, but you can't really beat the boldness of I Choose You, and the way the things that I Choose You does really well are really powerful in a way that this movie doesn't quite reach.
I think that it is a cleaner and better executed movie than I Choose You.
Yeah.
It does things that I couldn't do. Like, I guess, like, not to say anything about the direction or anything, but sometimes, like, a movie is supposed to do things that surprise you and make you amazed. And this movie can do that because it's got the chops to do it.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, it doesn't reach high enough. The bond with Lucario and Sir Aaron is compelling, but it doesn't reach what I Choose You does in terms of the boldness of what they're trying to do, which is, again, execute the story of all Pokemon.
Yeah.
The true story of all Pokemon.
Yeah.
Which is really bold, and it carries it.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to kind of, because at the end we'll kind of reflect back on this list more, but I think it's interesting to note that I think a lot of the movies toward the middle and the bottom of the list have that kind of similar, here's a guy in an airship who wants to kidnap this Pokemon kind of plot. Yeah. Whereas some of the ones more where we are right now have a kind of something different going on, which is interesting.
Yeah. I also want to say that Volcanion is the movie that Lucario immediately is on top of that beats. And for me, I think that the Volcanion is bold in a certain sense as well, and telling a story that is rarely talked about in Pokemon. Like, I mean, it's talked about in fits and starts, but it tells a story about abused Pokemon that is more nuanced than your usual story about abused Pokemon, and has that great moment where Volcanion says, you're an honorary Pokemon. Yeah. Like, this is not, you can't just make humans and Pokemons become friends after they've been so dramatically hurt. And so I think Volcanion does tell a more interesting story, in my opinion, at the end, but it does not have the chops that Lucario does. If Volcanion,
the well-roundedness.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just like the effortless execution. Yeah. If Volcanion had nearly as much execution as the Lucario movie does, then I wouldn't have problems with Magirina. I wouldn't have problems with this Airship Man.
Volcanion's the movie that Alex wishes was better, so he can put it higher on the list.
Yeah, exactly. I think that, despite the boldness of its statement, it doesn't quite make it above Lucario, whereas the boldness of I Choose You goes goes right above. Yeah. In my opinion.
Do you want to, before we wrap up, unless you have anything else to say about Lucario, do you want to briefly talk about Mewtwo 3D?
Yeah, so we reserve the right to constantly move Mewtwo 3D from its spot.
Yeah, because it's an outlier and should not have been counted.
And I finally decided what I wanted to do with Mewtwo 3D, and we discussed this. We want to put Mewtwo 3D in a place where, if we were in a mixed company of people where
all we knew was this is a group of Pokemon fans.
Yeah, they probably watched the first movie. Maybe they didn't. They watched fits and starts of the anime. What movie are we going to recommend? And by those standards, I would put Mewtwo 3D lower than my original ranking scheme, which was, how would I rank this movie if the Mewtwo, the first movie, never existed? Which is like, Which I feel like is fruitless. Because it wouldn't exist. Yeah. So... with that consideration, I actually just moved it a spot down. It's now below the Volcanion movie, and above most of the other movies.
But still in the same tier.
Yeah, so kind of in this...
And I've still got it above the Volcanion movie. I didn't move it. But I reserve the right to later.
Yeah. I feel like the last time you told me, though, you said that you haven't reevaluated this yet.
I
and
haven't,
that's why
because
it's there.
I don't want to think about it. Quite frankly.
So, not to say that it's any more stable there than any other time.
Who knows?
But for me, I'm pretty happy with where Mewtwo 3D is now, because I will say that if you're in that kind of group of people, you can watch Mewtwo 3D and have a good time. You'll have the experiences that you had before, and you'll be able to compare it, and it'll be a good nostalgia trip and all sorts of things, versus some of the movies further down, like Diancie, you might enjoy, but it's a harder recommendation because it's such an uneven movie.
Yeah. All right. So to wrap it up, let's talk about the movies that we are watching next. We were meant to watch this last night, but we're a day off now, thanks to our combined stupidity, quite frankly. So the next movie we're watching tonight, probably, is Zoroark, Master of Illusions. After that, we are watching Pokemon Forever.
With a 4.
The 4th Pokemon movie. And after that, we are watching Pokemon The Power of Us. We are very excited to watch these movies. This is the third to last batch we'll watch. We'll watch these 3, then we'll watch another 3, and then we'll have a last episode where we watch what used to be, and maybe still will be, who knows?
The reigning champion.
The reigning champion of this list. And kind of discuss the whole experience as well. So those are our next 3 movies.
Yeah, so watch along if you will. They're actually good now. And I just want to say I'm really happy to be watching good movies. It makes me more excited to watch them.
One thing I keep coming back to is that at this point we're comparing strengths of movies rather than weaknesses, which is a lot more fun to do. And I think why our episodes are longer. Yeah. Because it's more fun to talk about something you like than something that you have complaints about. All right. So thank you for listening. We're actually a bit longer than we were in our original recording.
I don't know how that happens.
It's easy to talk about things you like, Yeah. And I think also our summaries do kind of go on a little bit,
but it was cleaner this time.
It was cleaner. It did feel
was
cleaner.
Long but cleaner here. I remember the last one. We didn't remember a lot of things about some of these movies.
Yeah. All right. So thank you for listening to the Pikachu Project, and we will see you next time. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Don't let any unfamiliar trainers into your body.
Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.